This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Glynn Tonsor, K-State livestock economist, kicks off today's show with a cattle market update where he talks about the current market, cattle inventory report, and provides a trade update. February is American Heart Month, so project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at K-State, Tawnie Larson, joins the show to discuss heart health for farmers and ranchers and rural America. Ending today's show is Ashlee Westerhold, Director of the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition at K-State, previewing their Farm and Ranch Transition conferences. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update from K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor. Glynn, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Glynn, starting off our cattle market conversation with what is KASH doing?
Yeah, so this past week was a positive week in most of the markets we're going to talk about here. USDA AMS called the Fed cattle market on Friday at 209. I'll pause there and just say that continues the strong strength to start here 2025. That's up maybe $5 on the week, depending on exactly what day and hour I would do some comparisons on. When we look over at feeder cattle, AMS called the auctions $5 to $15 higher, depending on exactly what weight class we talk about. Two example lots here from Kansas sales. 63 head weighing 681 went for 313. 122 head weighing 822 went for 263. Now, those are the KASH numbers, and they were quite strong this past week. When you look over to the board, so CME contracts, they were more flat. Not weakness there, but there wasn't the same amount of strength. So February live cattle was 204, more or less flat on the week. Here I'll interject, that's up from 191 early in January. So, we're almost 5 weeks into the year, and we've already gained, $15 there in the trade. There's a strong tone there. Feeder cattle is more of that point. March feeder cattle closed 276 on Friday, down about $1 for the week, but it was also at 263 the first week of January. So I'm interjecting those as not only are these year-over-year gains just since the calendar year started, the cattle market has improved quite a bit. When we look over at box beef, so get to wholesale trade, choice box beef was called at 328 on Friday, basically flat with the prior Friday, and select was 317, up $1 from the prior week.
Any surprises when you look at the market, Glenn?
We're going to talk the cattle inventory report in a moment, and I think the entire trade now is convinced and kind of moving on from uncertainty on tight numbers. I think that's in here. We'll talk some beef demand stuff that continues to be better than we thought. Not big surprises. I think a little bit more of the same, but a lot more volatility is coming, and we're going to talk trade here in a minute. But please note, I haven't said anything about margins yet. Those are just prices, and the cost of doing business may well increase beyond what we expect here in 2025.
Glenn, you mentioned that cattle inventory report, and what do we see for January?
Yeah, so this is one of the key reports that USDA gives us every year. On January 31st each year is the January cattle inventory report. And I'm reminding folks what this is for a reason is, A, complete your surveys when USDA asks you to. More quality of information coming in makes these reports better is the point of that. The January report gives us a national snapshot and a state-by-state snapshot of several things in the live animal cattle side of things here. USDA estimates we started this calendar year at 27.9 million beef cows nationally. That'd be down 1% from last year, right on par with what most were expecting before the report. When you look at, there's 7 states that have over 1 million beef cows. Kansas is one of those. 4 of those states were up, but up very small. Missouri, Montana, Oklahoma, and Texas were up 1. In the case of Missouri, 2%, so very small increases in beef cow numbers. Nebraska and South Dakota were down 3%, and then Kansas was flush, like literally 50,000 cows different, which is a rounding error difference here. Put a bow on that is the leading states, the larger states, are a net zero, consistent with nationally we're a net zero, maybe 1% lower on beef cow numbers compared to last year.
And so showing we're not starting expansion?
Correct. And to reaffirm that, so the beef cow number says we hadn't previously did it because the cows weren't in the system yet that had grown. And then we look at intentions around beef replacement heifers. Those numbers were down 1%. So we started this year with USDA estimates 4.67 million head. As I said, down about 1% from last year. So not only have we yet to start expansion, we actually contracted a little bit more in 2025. My very broken crystal ball, Shelby, is this coming summer, so 5-6 months from now, there will be some operations that start the process of rebuilding and expanding. But when I look forward to the January 2026 report, I think it's going to show very small, net neutral, maybe 0.5% growth in cows at the moment. So very small interest in expansion. And best guess at the moment is it'll be the summer of 2026 when we have a lot more heifers held out. So I think we're still, maybe 18 months away from nationally relevant market moving herd expansion.
And as we're talking about the cattle market, something important to comment on, trade.
Yeah. So international trade, I'm a 44-year-old, and I'm interjecting that because during my lifetime, it's continued to grow in importance. Most of my listeners here produce something, and they may not personally know the end user of their products. So if you raise a steer, we get lots of beef items out of that, and those beef items go to the market where they're most valuable to the extent those markets are open. I usually use the example of tongue, is we export a lot of tongue and liver and so forth because they're worth more outside the U.S. than here, as a simple reminder. Why am I doing that to us? I'm a big believer as an economist that international trade allows countries and firms and individual producers in this example to better specialize and do what they have a comparative advantage in. And here in the U.S., we're really good at raising livestock and producing meat, but the extent we can do that effectively is a function of trade. I'm giving you all that because I have some concerns about what the latest announcements on tariffs might do in lots of fronts, but particularly on the ag commodity space. Specifically what I'm alluding to there, and most of your listeners know this, is the U.S. has imposed 25% tariffs on goods that come in from Canada and Mexico, as well as a 10% flat on China. There's lots of discussion about why those numbers are not the same or in the order they are. I'm not going to get bogged down in that. That's a discussion for a different day. But I want to give some context on kind of relevance and context on this. Quick overview. We do not have December of 2024 trade data yet. There's about a 6-week lag on that. We'll have it in about 10 days. So I'm going to look back at calendar year 2023 just to give us context here. And in 2023, our beef imports, 27% of those came from Canada, 17% from Mexico. When we flip it over to exports, 9% of U.S. beef exports went to Canada, 10% went to Mexico. So when it comes to meat trade, Canada and Mexico on beef particularly are quite important, but we have several other trading partners that are also large. That's why those two numbers aren't over 100. I'm going to interject here some pork numbers. We normally talk beef and cattle, but the relative announcement I think is largest for Mexico and pork is why I want to do it. Pork imports are largely from Canada, 65% of our imports are from there, 8% from Mexico. We're not a large pork importing country, but we're a very large pork exporting country. And 38% of our exports in 2023 went to Mexico. The Mexican market has grown a lot in relevance in lots of ways. In 2023, we exported 2.5 billion more pounds to Mexico than we imported. So very much a net export relationship there. Word of warning is we got to be careful with that relationship as it relates to pork relevance. I made in my notes here just to remind a shout out, hams is the product that's most relevant in that discussion. I try to give the example for cattle, tongues and livers and so forth. We export the majority of. We export a lot more ham than we do, say, belly. We're more of a bacon-consuming country than a ham-consuming country here. Hams historically, and it's been a growing market over time, have went towards Mexico. I'm interjecting that point also because I think you're going to see the ham market disrupted more than, say, the bacon market because it's more sensitive to international trade relations that are being affected as we speak. So the last thing I want to say there, and there's going to be a lot more on this coming week, is for those who want more context on this, in September of 2022, Darrell Peel, who our listeners know well at Oklahoma State, he and I were tasked with doing a report and find the full report. It's well over 60 pages, not for the light of heart, but it has a lot of figures and numbers in it on Ag Manager, where we looked at what if the U.S. stopped beef trade. So in particular, we looked at the example of just slowing. so a 10% reduction in beef imports and exports. And I want to give the bottom line point was our work says prices and quantities will decline in that example. Cumulative net present value, so the econ term to kind of put a bow on the impact of that, over 10 years would be a loss of $12.9 billion to feeder cattle sellers. So think cow-calf, background, or stocker. And then $6.8 billion to those that sell fed cattle. So think feedlots. Those are billions with a B. Bring that up if you want more information on this. But the point is these trade relations have developed over time because consumers in certain markets value those products more than domestically. And that's what we're in the process of testing. I don't want to make a political statement about the tariffs. There's lots of reasons they're occurring. That's not the point. It's my job as a market analyst to say there's real money on the table for our listeners here because you do operate in a global world, and the global market for beef and pork items is much larger than the domestic market.
Watching an eye also on live animal trade?
Yeah, so I focus mainly on meat. When we look at live animal, it is very relevant. Almost all our live animal trade is with Canada and Mexico, and that differs by animal. Briefly on hogs, there's a fair amount of weaned pig and some market hog transactions, primarily with Canada. And some of our listeners are in that business, so they're going to be well aware of those effects. When it comes to cattle, we trade feeder cattle with both Mexico and Canada. We've had the screw room discussion about trade with Mexico that's relevant here as well, and then some fat cattle or finished cattle trade with Canada. We could have a parallel discussion there as well, but when it comes to live animal, it's almost exclusively with Canada and Mexico, and that has a lot to do with we have a North American integrated live animal system, and geographically they are countries that border us, so it makes sense.
Glynn, if people want to find out more information from you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so everything I mentioned today you can find on AgManager.info. I mentioned demand earlier. I usually talk about the meat demand monitor. This week's report will be posted Monday or Tuesday. I think we're starting the year good, and I think we have a lot more uncertainty in the days and weeks ahead of us on the trade front.
Glynn, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me on.
That was K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about heart health as February is American Heart Month, and we're talking about this subject with project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at K-State, Tawnie Larson. Tawnie, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, great to see you.
Tawnie, as we're talking about heart health, first wanting to mention just some statistics around male farmers.
Right. So that's really important to think about. Male and female farmers and people in general have different types of chronic disease, and they started sometimes at different times in life as well. So male farmers that are 45 and older have an increased risk of heart disease. And that's interesting that that has been pulled out of the research. But compared to their non-farming friends or relatives, they actually have a higher risk of heart disease.
And what about women in rural America?
You know, women also have an increased risk of heart disease in rural areas. I don't have an exact research number on that one, but I think it's important to note that rural areas and people that live and work in those areas just seem to have different kinds of stress. We have different kinds of lifestyle, so that kind of makes sense as well.
Are there some other statistics when it comes to women in the U.S. and heart health?
So 44% of the women in the U.S. are living with some sort of heart disease. And these do start younger than men, but blood pressure is one of the most significant things that you can watch and monitor your health. And so blood pressure begins to rise in women earlier than men, and early signs are like hypertension, fatigue, unable to sleep, bloating, headaches, blurred vision. Some things that we might not think about are related to our heart disease, but that's a time when you need to talk to your doctor, see what's going on, measure your levels, whether it's your blood pressure or whatever, and just keep track of those.
Are these signs of hypertension for both men and women?
They are, and I think a lot of it does have to do with rural America, rural Kansas. There's not a lot of doctors in these areas, and so it does take extra time to get into the doctor. And so being able to self-monitor yourself makes a lot of sense.
Tawnie, are there a few things that maybe are a reason farmers seem to have higher levels of stress?
Sure. I mean, as you know, farmers have to deal with the weather, the markets, equipment malfunctions, financial hardships. I mean, the list goes on and on of someone that is per se self-employed and is managing every aspect of that operation.
Is their blood pressure then something that farmers or just people in general should regularly be checking, or just every so often?
So it'd be a great idea to have an annual exam with your doctor, an annual physical, and they will definitely take your blood pressure. And so make a note of that. And then they do have the small cuffs that you can have at home, and it would be a good idea to take your doctor's advice on how often you should do this, but keeping track of that blood pressure, maybe take it at the same time every day, log it. If you see a fluctuation or something, then you're basically self-reporting, and you can make an appointment with your doctor to follow up.
And while we're just here, and you mentioned it once, it's important to go get a baseline with your doctor?
Yes, for sure. So if you've not gotten a physical in the last year or so, hello, it's time. It doesn't matter how old you are. We always had physicals growing up and for school and that kind of thing. But, now that you're out on your own and you're an adult, it's really important to take that time. And yes, it might be a longer visit. You may be able to do a telemed visit, and then they might send you to a lab for some things. And so you don't actually see the doctor in person, but you could still get that baseline information and listen to what the doctor has to say.
What are some other conditions that may affect one's heart?
So there's a lot of other chronic illnesses that can affect your heart you may not think of. Some that we know and we talk about are the high blood pressure, high cholesterol, but diabetes, cardiovascular activity, that's definitely something, getting out there and moving a little bit more, and also like hearing loss. And we don't usually tie that together, but on my hearing loss segment a few months ago, we did talk about how that does affect your cardiovascular health as well.
And what can poor heart health lead to sometimes?
So it can lead to heart attacks and strokes. And so those can be something that impair your cognition, maybe physically, mentally. And so nobody really wants that and seeks that. So let's go ahead and get our annual physicals and keep track of where we're at and where we're going.
Also today, wanting to take the time to mention some things that maybe people could take into consideration if they're looking to improve their heart health. And what are a few of those things?
So you have your typical things that you're going to hear from everybody, especially now at the beginning of the year and Heart Month. And so eating a healthy diet, of course, being more active, maintaining a healthy weight. But instead of trying to just bite that off all at once, do what you can. I mean, make small changes. Maybe it's, I'm going to drink one more bottle of water and one less cup of coffee. And whatever you can do to help your body, that would keep you dehydrated. Sometimes the caffeine isn't the best for sleeping if you're drinking coffee all day long, although I know a lot of us do that. It would be something to cut back on. Maybe it's, I'm going to eat a little bit more salad, and maybe I'm going to eat chicken one more time this week. But there's just a lot of different things you can do a little bit at a time. And don't set huge, lofty goals that you're going to lose a whole bunch of weight here before, May wedding or something. It's like, just go ahead and do what you can to get as healthy as possible.
What's the recommendation for you might have for people who are hoping to integrate maybe some other choices into their lifestyle?
So focusing on what you can control. And maybe that's your food and some things for heart health, but also plan ahead in your operation. We always want to be there, but it's, really spend that time, and that could decrease your stress level over the whole planting season. But just really making sure your equipment's ready, making sure everybody's on the same page as far as what we're going to do this year and what the plan is. So you can't control every situation, but how you react to a situation is within your control. And so maybe it's a step back and think about it before you do anything else. But just keeping that in mind, that you can't control everything, but it's your response that makes a difference.
And we know, Tawnie, that a lot of people involved in agriculture are involved in agriculture because they love it. And however, what you love can be stressful. And so sometimes they need to find activities maybe to help relieve stress.
So it's kind of the basics that you hear from a lot of people, again, especially this time of year of all these New Year's resolutions. But taking a walk. And going on a walk, you could listen to a podcast. You can just go out and enjoy the weather when it warms up. Maybe going to the gym, if that's your thing. If not, just take a few more steps a day. If you wear a watch that keeps track, set a little goal for yourself. I'm going to get 11,000 steps today. or maybe it's you're getting 5,000 steps if you've been lower than that. So really making things attainable and what you can control. You can listen to a podcast or music too. That's a great way to pass the time, and you don't even realize that 20, 30 minutes has gone by. Also reading, just kind of taking that time to sit down and read something that you enjoy, not something that you have to read. And spending time with family and friends. And so that also includes planning. And the healthier you are, the more energy you have, the happier you probably are, the better you are to be around. And so that's really where doing things with your family and friends and social events really does make a difference and is important.
Is it also important sometimes to get your heart rate up?
Oh, for sure. So getting your heart rate up and moving, everybody's going to have a different threshold, but that's something that can be monitored by wearable devices. And that would be something maybe to talk to your doctor about as well, is what kind of goals they would like for you to set.
As we've talked about heart health, stress seems to go hand in hand with it. And so if people are looking to manage stress, what are some recommendations you have for them?
So there's probably a lot on the internet that you could find to help you manage your stress, but there are some things specific to rural Kansans and those that work in agriculture. There's a website hosted kind of by the Kansas Department of Agriculture and a lot of partners. It's called kansasagstress.org. And there are a lot of resources there for anyone that wants to take a look. Also, your local extension office may have some recommendations. We do have some programs through Extension that help with stress and resiliency. And also a great thing that we have in Northeast Kansas is Pawnee Mental Health. And they offer 3 free sessions for anyone that works in agriculture. So you can find their link on the kansasagstress.org website. And I would definitely recommend somebody take them up on those 3 sessions, and just maybe it's getting a reset on where you've been, and you may think that things are doom and gloom, and they can help you look at it a little bit different way and make some positive changes.
Any other websites you recommend if people are wanting to learn more about heart health or stress relief?
So there's a great website I really like, and it's called mantherapy.org. And it's a website just geared to men and stress and talking about feelings, and men deal with stress and probably illness differently than women do. I think women are mostly would go to the doctor for help, would seek therapy for help. So I don't think there's a womantherapy.org, but I definitely for the guys out there to check out the Man Therapy.
Tawnie, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
That was project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at K-State, Tawnie Larson, discussing heart health. As always, you can find out more information about the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at K-State by going to their website, www.k-state.edu/KASH, spelled KASH. I will link the other resources that Tawnie mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show talking about the Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences with Director of the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition at K-State, Ashlee Westerhold. Ashlee, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ashlee, what is happening at these Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences?
Yeah, so we are in our 3rd year of offering these Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences. We try to pick a location so that we can cover the whole state with these conferences. It is really a listening session, an all-day listening session to learn about succession planning, help you get pushed off of where you are today, maybe just keep you off center. If you are stuck or feel stuck, we are here to try to just have you keep moving forward and motivate you. And so we have been doing these conferences again. This is our 3rd year, and we're very excited to have them again this year.
Who will be speaking at these conferences?
So the last 2 years, we've had Dr. Shannon Farrell. And this year, we actually are having Lance Woodbury. Lance is from a Kansas farm himself, and we are very excited because he specializes in facilitation and mediation for farm families and has been doing succession planning processes with families across the United States and has become a national expert in farm family transitions. So we're very excited to have him. He serves tons of farm families, and we're just very happy that he's going to be a part of this. His technical role now is that he is a principal with Pinion, which is an agricultural advisory firm. So we're excited to have Lance and excited to have a Kansas native be our kind of keynote speaker.
Are there local speakers as well?
So in our conferences, we try to structure them to where you have local experts that fill our afternoons of these conferences. So we want to make sure that there's a local accountant and a local attorney that are represented at each location. So each location has a different one that is actually within that region. So they could service you past the conference. Each location has their own accountant and own attorney that will be there to kind of represent your region and give you information on how you can use accountants and how you can use attorneys through the succession planning and transition planning process.
What locations and days are these conferences taking place?
So the conferences are February 25th in Colby, February 26th in Wichita, and February 27th in Lawrence. Again, we try to geographically move across the state. And so each year we try to pick new locations, and we're very excited for the locations that we have this year.
What time do these days kick off?
The keynote starts right at 9. We have registration open at 8:30, and we try to end by 3:30 in the afternoon to make sure everyone can go home and get chores done.
Do people need to RSVP register for these conferences?
Yes, everything can be found on the AgManager website that will be linked in the show notes. But please register by February 21st so we can guarantee you a meal. Past February 21st, we will accept registrations as long as we're not at capacity in our room spaces. But please try to register by February 21st.
Is there a cost for these conferences?
The conferences are $60 per person. That $60 kind of equates to $10 an hour, where we do have attorneys coming to talk to you for an hour. So you get a whole hour of an attorney's time for only $60. So we think it's still one heck of a deal.
Ashlee, who do you recommend take the time to attend this event? People who are in the middle of transition planning, just beginning, or really anywhere in between?
We recommend that anyone who feels like they want to learn more about the subject, or they, again, are stuck in a position that they want to move off center and move forward, come to the conference. Someone there will say something that can resonate with you to hopefully get you moving. And so do not hesitate to come. We accept all farmers and ranchers, agribusiness members, people that have a business in their family that will need transitioned one day.
Ashlee, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was Director of the Office of Farm and Ranch Transition at K-State, Ashlee Westerhold, discussing the Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences. I will put the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net if you'd like to get registered for this event. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.